Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. And if you're on Eastern time, go ahead and eat your lunch off camera for the three of us, please.
Although if anybody's having anything really good for lunch, they can let us know in the chat.
Yeah, I'd like to know what that is. And just checking participants have no video on, right? Nope, we've got video on. Oh, participants, no video, webinar. Also, if you're joining somewhere, Robert, that is up to you. Also, if you're joining from somewhere far away, like Jackie, let us know. If anybody's further away from Germany, let's test the moment. Let's find out.
Breakfast burrito.
I can have a breakfast burrito for pretty much every meal.
It's appropriate for all times.
I thank you for commiserating on that with me, Jonathan.
Anytime, I'm here.
Yeah.
This is good. People seem enthusiastic about the topic.
Yeah, Robert's having a liquid lunch, and that's probably safe for him to say because none of his students are on or watching this webinar. Or maybe he's that kind of professor that's just like awesome and cool, and like his days might be numbered, but he's going to be beloved by all for that short amount of time.
Leftover lasagna, always good. Sometimes better than day of lasagna. So leftover.
You know what that means, right? That's like lunch and a nap. That's I hope there's ample room under your desk to roll into a brief food coma.
We'll try to make this stimulating enough so that you don't fall asleep. But if you do, it's okay.
Yeah. There was a rumor that for the Sales Enablement Society, the last conference, we did some interesting things. Like we did a person did breathing one day, like some mindfulness, which was great because my anxiety was high for a lot of reasons. But Robert Peterson and I were going to lead a hot yoga class. And we sort of got harangued by logistics. But I it's what could be. It's just leave that up to your imagination, or don't if you don't want to be grossed out by that.
Oh, I got a Chiefs fan on. That's not great. That's okay. All are welcome.
You guys want to get rolling on this? You ready?
Sure, let's go.
All right, I'll kick us off. So, hi, Jen, mac and cheese, thank you. Also, prepare yourself for a nap. Not while the webinar. After the webinar, you'll go through a big high, a lot of adrenaline. Then take that nap on our account. Tell your boss we said okay. All right, let's get going. My name's Bill Ball. I am a founding member of the Sales Enablement Society. And one thing I love about being part of the SES and the enablement profession is together, we're pioneering an evolving profession and evolving times. And what I mean by that is no one truly has all the answers or the absolute truth, and we have to depend on each other. So today, we're going to lean on each other about an emerging reality. Conducting successful hybrid experiences, and particularly that sales kickoff, a good percentage of you guys are planning to do right now. Let's remember when everything went virtual, in the before times, whenever that was, last year, several years ago. How many of us, I know I did, but how many of us had people in our own organizations asking us, hey, why can't you just do the same thing you normally do over Zoom? We knew, even if we couldn't articulate it then, we knew it wasn't that simple. And it's not as simple now using what we've learned from in-person and virtual to pull off a hybrid event. It's not that simple. So guiding, and I say that truthfully, guiding, because we want your input too. Guiding our discussion today is Jonathan Carlson and Mary Charles from Allego. they're going to remark on their own experiences, their customers' experiences, and they're going to ask about yours as well as throw out some tips and ask you some questions. So we definitely want to hear your questions in the chat. We're going to create room for them. If anyone asks, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, this will be available down the road. But please, as we learn together, jump in the chat, remark on your own experiences. We're building this thing together. Jonathan and Mary, take it away.
Awesome, Bill. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us. Always a pleasure to be here. We've done a few webinars with you guys at this point and always have a good time. And I think we always get some really valuable input from you. So as Bill said, don't be shy, contribute your thoughts, your ideas. We don't know everything here around this topic. We're just here to guide a conversation, share what's worked for us, what's worked for some of our customers, and keep this conversation going because it is always evolving. Like Bill said, back when the pandemic started, we were all sort of forced into a reality where we had to rethink things. How do we go remote? How do we train remotely? How do we stay connected remotely? Then we all sort of started flooding back into the office, and now we're kind of in a weird purgatory state, many of us anyway. And I think the moral of the story is, depending on where you work and who you are, many of us are in very different situations, but we all still need to stay connected to our teams and learn and train effectively. So we're calling that hybrid, right? So how are we going to train and learn in a hybrid world moving forward, both now and moving forward? I think it's beneficial just to sort of rally around our definition of hybrid, because it can mean different things. It can mean that training is both as either virtual or it's instructor led, right? So you're going through an online course on your own time, or you're going through an instructor led course, often in person, but you're having that instructor led experience, or combination of the two. Hybrid can mean asynchronous and synchronous. So synchronous meaning you're going through training at the same time as everybody else. Asynchronous meaning that you're going through it at different times, on your own time, on demand, right? And then this third bullet is really tricky. In-person and virtual participants for the same live sessions, right? So you have a live training session. Some people are there in person, some people are zooming in, they're virtual, but you're all experiencing the content together. So how do you make that experience equitable? I don't know if any of you guys read the New York Times this morning, but there was an article on how hard that specifically is, how difficult it can be to create equitable experiences when people are both in person and virtual at the same time. So that's what we mean, and these are some of the scenarios and some of the challenges that we're going to talk about addressing for sales training and kickoff sessions right now. So we're really curious, based on this so far, and again, let's ground the conversation in sales kickoffs. It's kind of that time of year, so it's likely top of mind for many of you. But how are you guys planning to deliver your SKOs? All in person, all remote, hybrid, or you're not sure, or this is not applicable to you? Why don't you go ahead and let us know what you think? This is good. We're seeing the responses flooding in, which is excellent. Mary, any thoughts on hybrid in general and sort of what we've seen from our clients and our teams?
Yeah, and I think we're going through this ourselves, so I can speak from personal experience. I've talked to one other person who's already done their kickoff and they did hybrid. So I'm going to share some of the learnings from that point. I think a lot of us are going to be expected to deliver a hybrid. And then the question is, how do we do it? How do we make it really good? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So it looks like I'm seeing 51% hybrid, 25% all remote, all in person, 12%. So I think it's easier if you're all in person or all remote, to be honest with you. I think hybrid's the most challenging. So let's talk about what you have to think about.
That's why we're talking about it, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Mary, why don't you talk about what you need to consider in a hybrid learning scenario?
Sure. I think number one, I think we know how to deliver successful kickoffs and make them interactive when we're all together. A lot of us did virtual last year and had to make that work. And now the big question is, how do you make it work if you're doing hybrid, which more than half of you are going to do that. So the poll results keep popping up for me. The tech performance technology, I think, is the number one thing that people are going to need to consider for hybrid. It's easier to control in a virtual environment, or if you're all in person, but when you have both, how do you make that experience meaningful for people who are virtual? And what do you do with the experiences in the room? So I think that's number one for me anyway. And one of the big issues is it costs a lot of money. If you have a big company with lots of people and lots of people on the phone, you're going to need to invest some money. So make sure you're budgeting for that, I would say. And just making sure you're staying connected. The other thing that you just started to talk about, John, was equity and inclusion. So how can you make it making everybody feel included, whether they're virtual or in person, as well as accommodating for, as you're going through some of the learning aspects of a kickoff, how do you accommodate for various learning styles? And then location is obviously people who are physically there or not there. How do you make sure that that experience is as good as it possibly can be for all the participants? And again, these are the things we're going to be talking about in this session. And then the experience, can you make it better than when it was 100% in person? There's very few of you who are doing 100% in person. So for the rest of us, how do we make it even better? What are some of the things we can do to make it a better experience? And then the last piece is collaboration. So how do you make it interactive and getting people to share ideas and participate? So those are some of the things that we think are top of mind and that people are considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the second primary bullet, equity and inclusion, that is such a critical one that we're going to talk about a lot. But training and learning in general, and just being part of a company in general, if you think about it, is so much about how do you feel involved and included in the company and in training efforts in particular. And you're not going to learn. You're not going to learn if you don't feel like you're being included and you don't feel like you're having an equitable experience to your peers. So that one's really important. All right, so today we're going to share 5 tips for hybrid sales training. And the first one we're going to start off with is setting the stage. So before the training even starts, what do you do to tee yourself up for a successful hybrid session? First and foremost, make sure that you're leveraging leadership to gain buy-in from your team. And leadership can be your chief revenue officer, your VP of sales, your head of sales enablement. But it's better if you go all the way to the top. Get your CEO involved. And have them send out messaging ahead of time to kind of rally the troops, get them excited, set the expectations for what the training is going to be, how it's going to be delivered, what content is going to be covered, and what the expected output is going to be, right? So what are the expectations of the sales team that management has for the sales team? And what should the sales team expect to get out of it, right? What's in it for them? You're taking sellers out of the field. You have to have something meaningful for them if you're going to do that, right? So make sure that they know exactly what they're going to get and how it's going to be delivered, and build excitement. Don't be all business all the time. Everybody knows that training is important. Everybody knows that training is something that has to be done, but you don't want it to feel like a chore. You want it to feel like this is something that they can really, again, rally around, and how they can see the benefit to themselves, see how they're going to learn, see how they're going to grow professionally, see how it's going to impact their lives and their performance, right? You can do this in a variety of ways. At Allego, we send out a lot of pre-meeting videos, right? We record videos from our leadership, talking about the session, talking about what they're going to get, encouraging people to respond to it, to start engaging before the session starts. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But just think about, rather than just having everybody show up on the day, either in person or click into their Zoom with their cup of coffee and have no idea what's going to go on, make it really clear ahead of time. And that will help you guys have a much more efficient and productive session. Mary, anything to add on this one before we move on?
No, I think if you get alignment from your leadership team, you're always in a much better position to have a successful event.
For sure. All right, let's go to tip number 2, focusing on the pre-meeting, which is what I was just alluding to. So Mary, why don't you take this one away?
My favorite part. I think this is going to be the key for successful event. Art Prom posted a really interesting comment. He said, it depends on the content you're delivering in this hybrid environment. If it's just lecture and telling people things, then it's probably going to be fine. But when you're actually trying to do that learning and interaction, it becomes much more challenging. So what I advocate for is what we did last year for our virtual event. And I'm going to ask the audience to feel free to post if you did some of this pre-meeting work as well, is we had a virtual event, but it was much shorter. It was just a couple of hours. because we knew people weren't going to be as engaged virtually, and we weren't going to do a lot of the learning and that type of stuff in the live call. So what we did is we did something, we called it run up to kickoff. And we used the 2 weeks prior to the meeting to deliver some of those sessions that we would have delivered had we all been in person, right? So they included a series of short videos, a couple of lunch and learns. But what we did is we put out these bite-sized pieces of content like you normally want to do for learning so people can absorb that. And we pushed it out each day. One of our leaders from our sales team recorded a really personal video introducing themselves, maybe sharing. I know I had my son in my video, somebody else had their whole family, but making it fun and memorable and saying, hey, today what we're going to share with you is the video on this new product that we're launching. And here are the 3 things I want you to think about. And then we pushed that video out, and everybody had some time as a placeholder to do this every day. We told them what to expect, all to tie to John's point about setting the expectations. And then we said, here's how much time you're going to spend each day. And it varied slightly, but these weren't hours and hours of e-learning or anything like that. These are short videos. But that way people could watch the video, absorb the content, go back to it if they wanted to. And then we also did a lot of collaboration on those where people were commenting on the videos. We're fortunate that we get to use our own platform to do that so people can collaborate asynchronously, like John was talking about. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, where people said it was great because I didn't have so much information thrown at me in one day. I could absorb it over the 2 weeks. I could post comments, people could respond, keep that interaction going. And then when we got to the live event, it was more interactive. There were more discussions. We saved it for a few presentations that people really liked, like win stories. We did recognition, all the stuff that makes people excited and feel good about the coming year, what to expect in the next year. So we didn't do so much training or learning in traditional sense during the virtual event. So for this year, I'm focused on doing something very similar, which is presenting that bite-sized consumable content, focusing on helping people retain that information and making it fun and leveraging asynchronous, because that's what our team is used to. So why would we put them all together in a room and jam packed in? So I'm curious what people think about that. If you want to post your comments, I know Bill's monitoring that for us. If they've done that or had any experience with that at all.
So there's a ton of stuff coming in. Robert, we're going to get to your question a little bit later. It's a great one, but too soon. Let's tackle Amy's question. And she said, what is your experience with pre-recorded productions versus live sessions for the sales kickoff and in this capacity that you're talking about? That's the first question.
Pre-recorded so using pre-recorded versus live in the kind of day of session.
Yeah.
So we have done pre-recorded presentations for our company kickoff, for example, and played them live the day of. I can tell you it worked really well. We didn't have people in a room, so they didn't even know it was recorded. But that way, everybody got to watch that video, experience that. We had it reduced the risk of presentations went too long or what have you. We are still planning to do some of that in the hybrid environment as well, that we would still have people in the room watch some of those, again, shorter recordings. These aren't 30-minute recordings to do that. So I don't know if that answered the question, Bill.
I think it did. And Amy followed up with a question, man, the chat's blowing up right now, you guys. So I'm just trying to keep up with it. She said, how did you manage questions for pre-recording? And I think it's interesting, right? Because I think what this is getting to is what's the balance of interaction versus information delivery that you should establish with something like this. And that's where some of that controlled messaging with the pre-record comes in and is valuable, right? To hit the time gaps that you're looking for. But how do you sort of balance that with interaction with people?
So a couple of ways. One is for that run up to kickoff I described, as I said, people could post comments and we responded to those comments. So there was interaction asynchronously. In the live meeting, when we played the video, or the virtual meeting at that point, when we played those videos, we used the chat really successfully. And in fact, I think we got more interaction than when we have someone, our CEO, standing and presenting at the front of the room. We very seldom get people to like raise their hand and ask a question. So in fact, it gave, especially people who aren't super outgoing, like most of us probably on this call, it gave people a chance to ask those questions via chat, and that's how we manage it. John, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the ability to engage asynchronously is huge, right? So that you're not putting all of the weight on the live session. And you can start getting questions out there ahead of time too. If you're able to share a video ahead of time, gather questions ahead of time, collaborate, engage a little bit ahead of time, and you can actually use the live session for more productive conversations, and more ground has already been covered. So I want to hammer that point home. But all sorts of different ways to mix and match the type of live versus recorded content that we're talking about. I don't think there's a perfect way, but I will say get as much done ahead of time as you can.
So the last thing I'll mention as far as the chat goes, you guys, is there's a bunch of questions that I think we can get to later in the conversation about the actual event and then the results afterwards. But there's a lot of good points that I'm seeing kind of consistent with some of the things that we have learned over the past couple of years about blended learning and giving people homework in advance to sort of make those interaction times a little bit more compact and meaningful. And I don't know if you guys have anything else to say about that, that kind of thing.
No, I think we're going to talk about
Cool.
that.
Great.
So Mary, I don't know if you want to cover just really quickly sort of examples of what asynchronous content looks like. I've had this slide up for a while, so hopefully people have taken a look at the types of content.
I'll call out one or two that I think work better when you can do pre-recorded. Number one is customer presentations. It's very hard for us to get a customer live to present at a sales kickoff. And especially now with everything that's going on, we were able to do a recorded interview with one of our customers last year. It was fantastic. And we never would have gotten that customer on. So our president of our company did an interview with them on topics that the sales team really wanted to know about. And the interesting thing was that customer was only able to do that call recording on a Saturday. So we wouldn't have even got him on a virtual session. So I think that you start to think outside the box a little bit, like what is the additional access you have to resources that you can do by pre-recording, and whether you play it live the day of, or you put it out to the team as a lead up to the event, that it can be better than it was before. So I found that was really good. And I mean, a lot of these are examples of just the things for just not for kickoff, but just for learning in general. I know we have a lot of success with when we get our top performers to record kind of what does good look like. In the past, I know I've tried at many events. I think this is the 18th year I've done a kickoff, which I can't believe. But we've had people get up in front of the room and try and do a role play and all these different things. But now I think you get these great videos that people can do ahead of time to share their experience, whether it's a win story or it's, hey, this is how the pitch for this new product. Here's how I got to be number one. Here's how I position this. So we've had a lot of great experience with that type of video as well.
Awesome. I see a comment from Art, saying by definition, asynchronous is not necessarily hybrid, right? It's not hybrid. And you are totally right. You can use asynchronous communication to prepare for all in-person or all remote events. But asynchronous is particularly beneficial to a hybrid environment because of that equity point that we were talking about earlier. If you've got people who are dispersed across the country and you have some people in the office, some people who are not, it is very hard to generate an environment where everybody can collaborate in an equitable fashion. So if you make communication and collaboration asynchronous and you allow people to collaborate on their own time when they can, in their own time zone, what have you, that makes the hybrid nature, the difficulties that come with hybrid training, it minimizes them and negates them a little bit. So I think it's particularly well suited to a hybrid training session.
And yeah, and there's a question related to this is how do you make sure people are engaged with the asynchronous content, make sure they have time for that in a live event. I think the key is to keep it short. And when people have to do a recording, they don't want to do a 10, 15 minute, they want to do something short. So bite-sized content, breaking it down into short pieces is extremely important. And back to John, your opening point about what's in it for them. So providing the value. I could tell you everybody watched that customer video. Nobody missed that. everybody watches videos from their peers. So making sure it's valuable content is the other way to make sure that they participate.
Awesome. All right, let's keep it moving. So we're going to get to our third tip here, which is connecting people. One of the more integral things you can think about when you're planning for any training session, right? It's all about connecting teams, connecting people. Yes, it's about the content, making sure that people are certified and up to speed and can sell what they need to sell and do it well. But a huge part of any large training session is bringing your teams together, right? And we're gonna hit on some of the same themes here, but from a slightly different angle. First thing, in terms of connecting people, think about the technology side of things. Again, when you are hybrid, when you've got some folks remote, when you've got some people in person, it is not the same as when you have everybody in the same hotel conference room and you just got a projector, right? So you have to worry about the projector and you have to worry about the microphone in the room. I'm not saying that's easy, but that's you have minimal things to worry about. When you are a hybrid, you have to worry about those things. Plus, how do you ensure that live experience translates to everybody who's not there? And I'm sure many of us have all experienced, we're trying to zoom in to a live session and you can't hear, you can't see. It feels like people are, talking to some, they're not even looking at you, they're not engaging with you, they're looking left, right. You don't feel like you're part of the session. I know that I've done this and I just want to knock on the window, right? I want to knock on the screen and say hello, pay attention to me. I'm here, engage with me. So you need technology that can support that can give your team, your remote team, a good visual experience, right? So you can cameras that focus in where they need to, when they need to, good audio so that everybody who's speaking can be heard, both on the live side of things as well as on the remote side of things. It's just a whole different dimension of technology that you need to think about. And it can get expensive. I'm not going to lie. It can be really hard to manage this. And I actually haven't seen anybody do it yet really, really well, but we're definitely getting closer. I know that certainly at Allego, we've invested a lot in good AV throughout our entire office, even to make sure that we can accommodate this sort of hybrid meeting scenario. And you need good engagement monitoring, right? So making sure that the folks who are remote aren't falling asleep, or that if they have a question, they can answer it. So you need somebody who's plugged in to the remote side of things, who's monitoring anybody who's raising their hand, any comments that are coming in via your video conferencing technology, and finding ways to pull that engagement into your live engagement, right? So blending those experiences is hard but important. This bleeds over into the team equity and familiarity section of the conversation. But again, we want the team to be able to know each other. Team bonding is huge, especially with a sales team. I think we all know that sales is very much a team sport. And yeah, you've got individual players, but the whole team has to perform in order to hit their targets. And the team is going to perform better if they know each other and they trust each other. So how do you find ways to build that trust in a hybrid world? Something that we do at Allego, actually outside of the sales team, we do it across the companies. We have an employee video directory where whenever a new hire comes on board, they record a quick video of themselves saying who they are, what they're doing, where they're working, little fun facts about themselves. And that's huge, especially, we've hired so many people remotely over the past 18, 20 months that I've never actually met in person, but I know who they are because I have this video directory. So you can do this either across your company. I think it's a great idea, but certainly within your sales team, make sure you've got a video repository of everybody on the sales team, just saying a few words about themselves and why they're excited to be on the team and what they're looking to get out of a training session if you want to make this directory specific to a training session. That kind of individual perspective, having that kind of perspective baked in to your training plan really helps connect people on your team. And as we've already said, encourage asynchronous feedback for broader exposure to coworkers. I think asynchronous is also a really good way to kind of level the playing field in meetings when it comes to soliciting feedback and insights from across the team. I think in a live session, we've all been there when the meeting is dominated by a few really vocal personalities. So there's those type A people, and we need those people and we value their input and we need a venue to hear them. But sometimes good ideas come from other people, right? Who don't necessarily want to speak up in a live venue, or don't feel enabled to, don't feel empowered to, or simply need more time to process what's going on in order to contribute their ideas. So we don't want to lose out on those ideas just because we're time bound, right? So encouraging asynchronous collaboration and communication overcomes that challenge and allows everybody to contribute on their own timetable, which I think is really valuable. And again, that's not just a hybrid challenge, that's just a general communication challenge, but I think it's a good example for how to improve hybrid training scenarios for sure. And then, as we've started to allude to a couple of times, go beyond formal training content. Again, you need it. We're not saying don't do formal training, you should do it, but make your training sessions conversational, be creative, and make them personal, right? This is an opportunity to get to know people, for the team to get to know each other, and to start building not just team bonds, but really clear paths of communication, which are going to serve you really well after the training, because you need your sales team to be communicating and sharing information with each other in order to be optimally successful, right? Just think about how to make the training fun. Get creative with it. Involve family. Involve pets. I know we've had we've pre-recorded some sessions and other videos prior to training sessions where people will bring in their kids, or they'll have their dog or their cat with them. I've heard stories about people dressing up and just doing sort of crazy stuff, which makes people laugh, but also just kind of lowers the temperature in the room for any sort of training and makes people feel more comfortable. When people are comfortable, they're going to learn better. Just a tip in terms of optimizing the time that you have. And again, in a hybrid situation, creating these moments is more important for keeping everybody engaged and on the same page. Bill, do we have questions from the audience that you want to dive into?
Two, yes. One of them, Michelle asked a little ways ago. I had to crawl all the way back up in the chat with all the questions we're getting. So she asked, for your hybrid meetings, did you find that they were split evenly between virtual and on-site? Does the meeting become harder to manage if that percentage is not even? So any advice on what to do if most people are skewed one way or the other? Yeah,
that is a hard question, because quite frankly, the minute you have one person who's virtual, you need to think about how do you make that experience equitable for them. You could argue that it becomes more important, the greater the division is between your company. But I really do think that it's, even if you have a small number of people who are going to be remote, if those people are on your sales team and you're depending on them to be productive and connected to their teams, you need to put a good amount of thought in terms of how you make the experience beneficial for them as well. So I don't think there is like a clear percentage that you need to think about.
So as soon as you enter that space of hybrid, it needs to become an equitable experience, period.
I think it does. Mary, what do you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think one of the key things, and this may seem obvious, it wasn't that obvious to me until a week ago, is to survey your team and to see who's planning to come or not to come before you start digging deep into your plans, because you probably will make adjustments. For example, someone had posted, I think about breakout sessions, that breaking people out in small groups in the room, you'll need to break people out in small groups on the Zoom as well, and knowing how that's going to look. So a survey, I would say, to at least get a understanding of who's coming and who's not. The person that I spoke to about the event she did last month said they thought maybe they'd get 80% of the people, they got 50% in person and 50% remote.
Yep.
So a couple other things really quickly, and this gets a little bit more into the nitty gritty, but Jonathan, you brought up some nitty gritty that I think got to people's attention, which is the video directory. Shane, hi Shane, he asked how would you use video directory in a sales kickoff setting? How do those things fit together?
Yeah, and Mary, I love your input here too, but I would say that as I started to talk about, when you can use this method across the board just as a company-wide thing, but if you're just thinking about an SKO, just get all your salespeople to record a quick video saying who they are, when they joined the company, what their focus in, what their region is, whatever is particular to your sales team, and then one or two things that they really want to get out of the kickoff. Right. And I think you can start to create a dialogue that way, and again, start to get to know people's personalities. So I think you can create like an SKO specific directory that just allows sellers to better understand each other.
Great. This was an inevitable question I think that we would get. And you guys can tell me right now, hey, Bill, we're not there yet. But gamification, does that enrich an experience like this? Do you have any experience with it?
Yeah, Mary, I'll leave the practical side of it to you. I think theoretically, yes, I think gamification is always an interesting area to explore in terms of getting folks, especially in a remote scenario, to engage and incentivize the team, make it a little competitive. Find ways to unlock certain levels of achievement or whatever you want to do. Sellers are by nature competitive, so adding something along those lines to the training is beneficial. But Mary, I'll let you speak a little bit more specifically if you have thoughts.
It's a good question. I haven't done a lot of it hybrid yet, but I'm still thinking of working in my typical Kahoot game and letting people participate who are remote as well as in the room. I think that gives everybody that shared experience, and maybe teaming them up, like, hey, some people who are virtual be teamed with some people in the room or something like that. I haven't thought through all of that yet, but it's a great point that wanting to include that, but it's got to be something that's accessible online.
Exactly.
Obviously.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's keep going. So just a quick case study for you guys. Always like kind of grounding these conversations in reality and with examples of people who have done this successfully outside of us. John Hancock's, a client of ours, and they took a really people-focused approach to their SKO. The first thing they did, which I think is really important, I think actually in any training scenario, but particularly a hybrid and anything where you've got virtual participants, they broke the training into manageable chunks with lots of breaks. So I think they only ever scheduled 4-hour sessions of training and scheduled a lot of off time into those 4-hour chunks. Just because, if you're sitting on an 8-hour Zoom meeting, or even if you're sitting in an 8-hour in-person meeting, you are going to fall asleep. Like, you're just going to be detached by the end of it. I think, again, we all have this shared experience, I would assume. Just by the end of any really long training day, if you've been going nonstop with just a lunch break, even if the content at the end of the session is really fantastic and important, you're not going to be highly engaged. Your brain is going to be tapped out. So think about keeping all the training in really small, digestible chunks. It will serve you well. The other thing that they did, and this gets back to our conversation around pre-recorded content, 90% of their kickoff content was pre-recorded, right? So that allowed all of their higher ups, all of their SMEs, their subject matter experts, to record content ahead of time when they could, even if they weren't available on the day. And they recorded that and then shared it out live during the session. But what they did to add more of a real-time, more engaging spin on it was they presented rather real-time introductions that made the content feel live and feel more engaging. So that worked really well for them. And then, as we were talking about, they made it more personal. They made it more fun. They had virtual activities for families. They had a musical concert, a drawing session for kids at home, a yoga session, meditation. They had a virtual happy hour, and other cultural events that just, again, lowered the temperature, made people feel comfortable, included people's families, which have become, families are always important, but especially when many people are working from home and attending from home, families are a part of your environment. So they found ways to take advantage of that. And overall, their session was a huge success. So great example there. All right, Mary, let's talk about diversifying training elements. This is an important one.
Yeah, and it's good lead in because Amy asked a question about working in swag, I think, for remotes. So I'm going to talk about that right now. Lots of great comments. Keep them coming. I know Bill's monitoring and I'm trying to read them as well. So in the, and we'll say training elements or kickoff elements, we did do for our company kickoff, not just for sales, but for everybody in the company last year that was virtual. We sent out, we had a theme of rev your engines, and we worked in this racing car kind of theme. And we sent everyone a box in advance with a bunch of different items in it to create this kind of connected experience. And we also had in there, we also sent them in advance an Uber Eats card so they could order lunch for the day of. So everybody could order their lunch, and we worked in a lunch break. And people really liked it. We had one, it was fun to get, it's fun to get a box. So always fun to get a box, and ours had a checkered flag on it. And we asked them not to open it until the day of the event. I can't say everybody abided by that, right, John? But we had things in there that some were like, we had a little checkered flag, and at certain points of the event when we were kind of cheering, people all kind of did that. It sounds really corny, but people did it. They liked it. And we worked in different branded items and things that were related to growth and on all the different messages. And then we put a card in that was printed with our top goals for the year, and people could hold on to that. So for us, it worked really well. I encourage people to do it. It creates that shared experience. It helps tie in the theme. And this year, we haven't, I don't know what we're doing yet this year for the box, but we'll come up with something, something that we would give to people in person, obviously, as well as at home. So working in, I mean, even working in quizzes in the live hybrid session, breaking out into small panels, small groups is something we're definitely planning to do. And that breakout session, managing those rooms and things virtually, it's going to take a lot of coordination. I think we all know that. So I'm planning to do more work up front and more of that lead up to kickoff, so that the day of, there's not as much to think about, but certainly creating a variety of elements as we normally would do in any kind of training day as well.
All right, fantastic. And this last point, I think, Mary, is near and dear to your heart, and I'm sure a lot of folks on the line can identify. How can we proactively reduce stress? Sales kickoff, sales trainings for sales enablement professionals are high stress situations. A ton of weight is put on your shoulders. So how do you negate that a little bit? How do we make it even a little less stressful, given the even amplified level of stress of having to think about two separate, potentially separate groups of people in terms of folks who are in person versus remote?
Yeah, so as I was just saying, it's a good lead into this, to do more. We have the do more backstage. So we have this concept that we recently rolled out in a book that our CEO and president wrote about mastering virtual selling, and talking about what you do backstage versus front stage, like the actual live experience with a customer. And I'm thinking about kickoff and other learning events in the same way. How much can I do before the event, backstage, and also what can I do after the event to reinforce the key concepts and keep that, keep that momentum going? That takes a tremendous amount of pressure off. I think some people commented, the more you can do as pre-recorded that makes sense for your event, the better you'll be, not just, as we said before, not just for the technical issues, but also just for people to not go on and on about a particular topic. So you get someone on stage and you're trying to keep them within a certain amount of time. What we might have done on stage in 30 minutes, if we do a pre-recording, it's 10, and they really make sure the message is succinct. So that helps take a tremendous amount of pressure off. It does take advanced planning, but it makes the live time, whether you're doing all virtual or hybrid or all in person, at least you have a good portion of your content that's been created, and you're not waiting for those day before reviews. I'm sure other people have experienced that, where you say it's due on Monday and you get it the Friday before. So all of those reviews happen ahead of time, because everything's got to be buttoned up. And then if something doesn't go well, somebody can re-record it. That's also a potential. And knowing what to say for in person, we've talked about that discussion, and that doesn't take as much planning. Honestly, if you have different topics you're talking about, salespeople want to talk. They want to, if they're together, they want to be sharing ideas and brainstorming. And so we save a lot of that for the in-person or live session, whichever you may be doing. The crowdsourcing your content. So I had, I don't know, at least 8 or 9 different people who recorded presentations ahead of time, maybe 10, as well as our sales leadership for those intro videos I mentioned. I didn't have to record. I did one intro video. That was all I had to do. But I was able to use other salespeople to share stories about their success. I was able to, obviously, I talked about using a customer, sales leaders, our product, chief product officer, all those people that normally I wouldn't have time to get them all up on a stage, because nobody wants to get on stage if it's 15 minutes. They're like, I can't do anything in 15 minutes. I need at least a half an hour. So from that perspective, I think having a variety of people presenting and crowdsourcing that type of content works much better in this idea of doing more pre-event, if you will. Reward compliance, John, I don't remember, I think you might have put this one on there, that, giving people rewards for actually partaking in the run-up event.
Yeah, I think this is another way of just keeping people engaged and motivated, right? So if you've got pre-work for folks to do ahead of the training, track the fact that they completed it, and if they did, give them something. It doesn't have to be big. It can be you can be first in line at lunch in the live session, or you can we give you a $5 gift card or something, right? But just again, it goes back to the idea of gamification, making people feel like they're earning a reward for their participation just helps with engagement there. So you can get creative with it too. I've seen folks do it differently, and you can take it in some interesting directions depending on your team.
Yeah. And I'm seeing, I can't thank you guys enough for posting all these great ideas that are on here, Bill. People have posted all sorts of different technologies they're using, some that I'm not even familiar with. So I'm going to write those down. And Nadia asked a question about tips for producing hybrid award ceremony. We have not done a hybrid award ceremony yet, but this year we will have to do that. I'm thinking of putting together some sort of video ahead of time, just which may not be, it might be a picture of the person and like what they did to run that, so that the people in the room are watching it as well as the people online. Some sort of a presentation that people could see in advance. That might not be as exciting as what Nadia is looking for, but putting that to music and making that a fun video as opposed to each person and read the name and right. So I think Bill's nodding his head. So I think that's a more successful approach, or would be more interesting for the audience in person as well as online.
Totally, assuming that all 100 of those people don't have individual unique rewards, and if so, man, your company must be killing it, and congratulations. But like to Mary's point, if you can turn any of that into a story that people can engage with in some kind of way, and bucket that group of people of like, these are the people that made this possible, but make it about the story for the company, like it's a good cause for everybody. One thing that came into the chat, I think, Jill, you've been sending stuff to hosts and panelists, and you've been having so many good comments. I wanted to share one of yours. Jill mentioned that the lockbox thing that I think you were talking about, getting back to swag, Mary, that's always a tough bet with salespeople, because those are the folks that we asked to find the shortest line between A and B. So sending them something that says "do not open" is kind of a recipe for disaster. The only scenario that I've seen that work in is tying it to some kind of game, like if you open this, you are out of the game. Finding some way to create a little bit of a quid pro quo there. I've seen that work once. But like, just own that like a certain percentage of your audience is just a losing battle because they can't help themselves.
We told them there was no alcohol in the box and they weren't as excited to open it.
Yeah, all of a sudden nobody cared. Yeah,
nobody cared.
Then they're going to say they're disappointed there's no alcohol in the box, even though you told them that was
right.
Awesome. Anything else on this, Mary?
No, I think that was it.
Cool. I want to just double click on something that we touched on, just in terms of how you think about virtual versus live content. And we're talking about hybrid. We've predominantly been talking about hybrid as a situation where you've got both virtual and virtual and live people consuming the same content at the same time. But there's a component of this where people are simply consuming some content virtually and you're consuming some content live. So in those situations, really think about what are the activities that are going to benefit most from being live in person together, right? Because people can go through training content on their own and absorb it on their own time and probably have an equally, if not more effective learning experience than they would if they get all that information dumped on them in a live session. But on the flip side of things, you cannot have you cannot bond with your team, right? You cannot as effectively crowdsource ideas in real time remotely as you can in person. So just think about like, what are the activities that I want to do as part of my sales trainings, as part of my kickoff, and what are the elements there that really need to be in person, right? And then you can really focus on optimizing the in-person time for those activities. So as a takeaway for this, I think we've been all over the map in this presentation, and we've had so many great ideas. I just want to sort of ground your thinking in terms of, if you do have the opportunity to get everybody together in person, what is the best use of that time? Don't just think of it as a checkbox in terms of we need to get X, Y, and Z done. Think about what is the best format for getting all of those things done. All right, one last case study before we close here. WS Audiology, another client, and they had an SKO where they crowdsourced content. And this again sort of gets into the competitive nature of things, a bit of gamification. They asked reps to share best practices for selling one of their products. And they said to do this ahead of time, to create a video of them sharing best practices for selling a product. They were encouraged to make it short, creative, fun. Costumes were highly encouraged and utilized. And all of those video submissions were collected and reviewed ahead of time. The team shared the top 5 at the kickoff, and the attendees all picked the winner. Right, so this is just a good way of getting people involved and engaged. Again, took advantage of competitive nature, and encouraged people to really think about the best practices for selling this one product, and also as a benefit, helped give everybody else examples of what good looks like, right? Which is always what we're looking for sellers to share their best practices with other sellers, so that they can all see how top performers are thinking and performing. So that was really effective for them. And then separately, they were able to reinforce all of the learning from their training session with flash drills via Legos. So all of the different scenarios that were covered in the training session, they were able to turn into drills within our platform, where sellers were quizzed on certain selling situations, right? And quizzed on what they had learned within the session. So a good example of post-event, post-training follow-up, which is just as important as pre-event work, right? Making sure that after the event, we're continuing to test and tune knowledge, because I think we all know the stat, something around 80-90% of training content is forgotten within a couple of weeks of delivery if it's not constantly reinforced. So this is a good example of a company doing that successfully. All right, so those are our 5 tips. We talked about setting the stage, right? Getting buy-in from leadership and setting expectations. We talked about focusing on pre-meeting activities in order to make more efficient use of your actual meeting time. We talked about connecting people, connecting teams, making sure everybody feels familiar and comfortable with one another, and also thinking about the technology that's needed to do that. We went through diversifying training elements, not making it just sort of a one-size-fits-all training, but keeping it really highly engaging and differentiated. And then we talked about reducing stress, making sure you're doing everything you can ahead of time and even during the meeting to make sure that it is an effective but stress-free, or at least stress-reduced situation for the folks who are actually putting this training together. So with that, we want to take one more poll. It's the same question that we asked at the beginning, and maybe you have the same answer, which would be great. But we want to know if this conversation today influenced you at all. So after watching this webinar, how are you now planning to deliver your SKO? Did we scare anybody away from hybrid, or did we pull anybody into that scenario? So we want to know what you think. And Mary, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see any change, or Bill, what do you think?
My information is going to be biased by what I can see right now, and hybrid is climbing, man. It's pretty interesting. While we're watching this climb, Brenda asked a great question, and that's about any thoughts about running the live event first, and then a week after the virtual event for those who weren't able to attend in person. I think that's a big and important question. That like, it probably depends on people's experience, but I wonder if there's a rule of law or an it depends from you guys on that.
Mary, what do you think?
I think that would be a lot of work.
Yeah, it sounds like a big ask. Yeah.
I can't imagine doing it. Honestly. It's because if you're investing all that time and technology to try it, I don't know. I can't imagine doing it separately virtual and not having everybody have that experience at the same time. And there's I posted a note asking people if what their experience has been with the technology piece. And I saw someone had posted a response about how many cameras it took and all that stuff. I think it is the biggest challenge, is having the right technology and spending a good chunk of money to do that, to make it work hybrid.
So it looks like hybrid was our runaway winner at the end. I'm interested to know, Robert asked these questions during his liquid lunch. At the beginning, I wanted to make sure I hung on to them at the end. And those were the big questions about measurement. So his first question was like, how are you measuring if this was a success or not? And I know that's a little dubious and there's probably a lot of details to it, but he asked another follow-up question that I thought was pretty interesting. And that was, excuse me, that was, does it change the way we measure things because the event is kind of a different experience than it was before, and we were honestly unlocking different things?
Yeah, Mary, I'll give you the most of the stage time here because you're always thinking about this. But you've always got to be in any sort of training session, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in person. Like, you need to be able to find ways to tie your training activities and training engagement to actual sales outcomes, right? So is it actually improving the performance of your sales team? This gets into revenue intelligence, understanding how engaged somebody is with training content versus how successful they are, or how much they improve over time. Are they hitting their numbers? Now, that's not something you can look at the day after the training, right? You can't say, oh, well, training was yesterday, and today I give Steve an A+ for his training participation. That's something that you look at the end of the quarter, and you say, okay, well, Steve hit his number, and he didn't last quarter, but distinctly after this training session, his results started going up. So you need technology that can start to correlate those things. But Mary, I think that's a bit bigger picture. I'm curious from your perspective, how do you gauge and measure success, and has it changed now that things are virtual? Or hybrid?
Yeah, that is a hard question. It's a good question. I think I need to think more about that. I don't know if it's totally changed. I think we still measure, for us, we measure changes in behavior and looking what people are actually doing during their sales calls and what those results are. So if we're rolling out new messaging or new product or anything like that, we continue to measure that. We're always measuring that. I think for the event, there is an element of satisfaction, like what the experience has been. I think we would ask questions like that, especially for the virtual audience and the in-person audience, about how it compared maybe to the year before, and did they find value in it? I think those the satisfaction questions aren't always the most important, but in this case, I think you want to get feedback on what that experience is like. So the next time you run a hybrid sales meeting, you can learn from those. So I think that's going to be more important information to gather.
For sure.
Yeah. And someone posted a note, which I totally agree with you, Shane. Correlation is the key. You can't say we did this at kickoff and therefore everybody did really well, but correlation to anything you roll out at kickoff. But the follow-up after kickoff is just as important. Keeping reinforcing those main ideas that came up in the event, as well as coaching to any of the new key concepts or whatever you're trying to reinforce.
Yep, absolutely. Phil, anything else?
So two things. One, this is not our last webinar of the year. Normally, Sales Enablement Society gets really quiet and takes a long winter nap and strategizes for the next year. Over the next couple of months, we will have you will see word on LinkedIn and other channels about our next webinar in December. I want to thank everybody for doing exactly what I expected to do as a Sales Enablement Society, which is provide their own answers, their own ideas. And this has been a highly interactive session. People are asking for the chat transcript, you guys. I've never seen that before. And that's because there's so much good information in it. But what I would like to ask you, Jonathan and Mary, is, if they have follow-up questions, because again, this is an experience that we're all navigating and figuring out what's the best way to reach you guys. And thank you for providing so much great guidance and information. Yeah,
of course. You can always reach us through our website. So you go to the contact us section of the website and you can shoot us a note. You can also feel free to email me personally. My email is jcarlson@allego.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a question. I go right ahead. You can flood my inbox. I'm sure I'll pass anything on to Mary. I won't share her personal information if she doesn't want.
Oh, you can send me mcharles@allego or LinkedIn. I check LinkedIn as well. I do respond to those. We would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear any great ideas people come up with that we didn't cover today. We recognize it's a challenge, just like it was a challenge when we went virtual, like Bill said. So look forward to hearing how it goes for people.
Thanks, everybody. This was awesome. Let's do it again, Jonathan and Mary.
Yeah,
Thank
Anytime.
you. Thanks for having us.
Talk to you guys later. Thank you, everyone.